Welcome to the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, a place for working Muslim women to share their stories, struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way in pursuit of their careers. I'm Dr. Qaali Hussein.
And I'm Dr. Hani Ahmed. And in this podcast, we bring inspirational, trailblazing, successful, and fulfilled professional Muslim women to you.
Get ready to be inspired and learn how you can forge your own path as well. Welcome to the Professional Muslim Women's Podcast.
Hi.
I am Dr. Qaali Hussein, and I am a trauma surgeon, a surgical intensivist, and a mother of 6.
And I'm Dr. Hani Ahmed. I'm an internist and a mother of 2, and we are both from Somalia.
So we started this podcast because of our mutual shared experience of pursuing our careers and our family life.
Yes, we think this podcast will serve an important place. It's inspired by our real life experiences of pursuing careers and family life as professional Muslim women.
Right. So Hani and I met on social media through Facebook, through a Somali professional network, in the process of creating a career fair for our youth. And in trying to create something, we realized that we both had the same experiences of not having a role model to look up to, especially being Muslim women and especially being mothers. So we felt like since we've both been through that, and there still seems to be a lack of role models, that we would create this platform so that Muslim women who are professionals who are going through these experiences within their career, or young aspiring women who hope to pursue these careers, can have something to rely on as far as shared experiences of being a Muslim woman is concerned.
Yeah, definitely. We thought that, there isn't a lot of platforms out there to discuss our journeys, our obstacles, triumphs. We wanted to be able to, create a shared platform where we can tackle several things that are directly relevant to us as professional Muslim women.
And one of the important things that we actually want to discuss on this podcast is the stereotypes, right? So if there's one thing that defines Muslim women is stereotypes.
Right.
Stereotypes of being, when you're a hijabi, that you're oppressed.
Right.
That the
Submissive.
only thing, exactly. Or that, the only thing that you can aspire to become is a homemaker.
Gendered roles and basically being in a submissive role. And this narrative is usually told by someone other than Muslim women, right?
Exactly.
Right. So some other things that we want to tackle as well is workplace difficulties that can arise due to stereotypes or prejudice or whatnot, especially around, being a visible minority by wearing a hijab. So that one's a big one in our community.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you stick out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Right? It's one of those things, a lot of minorities feel, and I feel like being a woman, being African, being, a hijabi, which is, a woman who wears a hijab, is basically being in a category of being the minority of a minority of a minority.
Oh, yeah. Like a triple minority. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. And the other thing is that we don't talk about these things, right? Especially in the workplace, there aren't that many people in the workplace that can understand the things that you could be going through, or, random comments that are made, or, your ability to get promotion and how perceive you, how that plays into your career development. There's no place to talk about that.
Oh my gosh, you are so right. That is so true. And it just leads to this situation where you're experiencing this in an isolated way. You think you're the only one who's going through this because of the fact that you're typically the only Muslim female, right, in that space.
Yes.
So you're having all these feelings in an isolated way, but it turns out that we're all kind of experiencing something similar.
Right. And that's one of the things that we also want to highlight on this podcast is, although we're both physicians, we want this podcast to be for Muslim professionals in all fields. We can all learn from each other. We'll have young women who are aspiring to not only be, physicians, but, who want to be lawyers and who want to be teachers and whatnot. We're going to try and get the perspective of all these professional women in all these diverse fields to give, their opinions of their experiences and things that they've overcome, the obstacles that they've overcome, and how they've overcome them to get to where they are today.
There are a lot of accomplished Muslim women out there. They really are out there.
Right.
And, we never hear their stories. We don't hear our stories. Like you said in the beginning of the podcast, there's narratives about Muslim women in general they skew negative and they tend to be
Hmm.
told from the perspective of an outsider. By discussing, highlighting, bringing to attention accomplished Muslim women, mashallah, who've, done great things, I think this can be inspirational for the young women in our community who want to hear those stories, who would benefit from hearing those stories and feel inspired.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we absolutely lack. I remember looking in the process of doing the research for this podcast to see, if there's something like that out there. I basically came across the same issues that I had when I was pursuing my career to become a surgeon,
Yeah,
right? I looked for someone that looks like me. You can't be what you can't see. And I tried to look for someone that looked like me, and I couldn't find someone that looked like me that did exactly what I wanted to do. And in looking for this podcast, when I searched, I Googled, I went to YouTube, I went to where all the podcasts are stored,
yeah,
and there isn't a podcast for Muslim women that talks about professional advancement.
right.
The few things that I found were talking about Muslim women being oppressed,
Yeah,
right? Sadly, that is a part of the story. That we
right.
have Muslim women, all over the world that live under suppressive regimes.
Yeah,
But, there are billions of Muslims in the world, right?
yeah, absolutely. There isn't just one story. There
There isn't.
definitely is not. We're not a monolith of right.
Exactly. So I think those are the stories that we need to tell. And those are the stories that we need to show to our young women to say, you are more than what people's perceptions are,
Right.
because the perception is what creates all these stereotypes.
Absolutely. And when you are in a position where you are a minority and, especially one that is visually obviously a minority, and just by living, by wearing a hijab, for instance, or, just by being that one woman in the room, people have prejudices and you are dealing with this prejudice, whether, we like it or not. I think it's good for us to talk about it and to bring it to attention. We deal with and we face prejudice. And these are our experiences. And this is how we overcome it. And this is, what we share. But you know what? We have our own stories to tell. And I think it's so important that we sit down and we talk about how our stories are about so much more than what people's perceptions are and their judgments and their prejudices. And I think that by discussing that and talking about our achievements, about our lives, about how diverse they are and how diverse we are, I think this is going to be a way of many of kind of fighting back against those perceptions and those prejudices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so now let's do our stories.
Okay, let's
Uh,
introduce ourselves.
and I think I made a mistake. I said billions. There's supposed to be like 1.5 billion Muslims,
Yeah,
I
that's
believe.
right. Yeah. It might
There
be
aren't.
even higher than that now. I
Yeah.
think the last figure I read was like 1.65 billion.
Okay, 1.65. But it's not billions. It's one 1 billion.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Okay. So now we can talk
Yeah.
about our experiences. So,
Yeah.
Hani, give us a quick recap of how you came to your career.
So, a little bit about myself, my professional biography. I was lucky in that my parents, the household that I grew up in, my father was pretty liberal. And by liberal, I mean he was very open and was very encouraging of basically education
Right.
for every one of his daughters. My father didn't have any boys, he only had girls. Kind of from an early age, he said, girls, go to school, go to college, go to university, pursue higher education. Every step was okay, think about pursuing the next step. So I naturally kind of gravitated towards the science. I was pretty good at it. Now, as an adult, I think being a doctor also had a sort of allure about it, of respect. And, I knew it would make my parents proud. I'm sure that had something to do with my judgment call. I was in high school when I was when I said, "Oh, I'm definitely going to be a doctor." But the path wasn't easy. I'm sure other Muslim women can relate to this, but one of the things that my parents worried about was student loans, leading to interest payment and kind of getting into that question of the permissibility of that. My father's opinion was that it was kind of a gray zone, and he thought if I could get away from that by paying for my schooling, that would be beneficial. And in fact, I ended up actually getting my education overseas. I actually trained in medical school in Pakistan. I had my friends there. Yeah, I was there for 5 years. It follows the British system. So it's like you do your high school, they do their O levels and their A levels, which is their A levels kind of breaks into science and non science courses. And then you take an entrance exam. I started by doing the entrance exam. Then I went to medical school for 5 years. And then I ended up, instead of doing my internship, which would be the 6th required year in Pakistan, I ended up actually doing a few externships in the US. That kind of got me into the waters in the US. So then I ended up training, doing an internal medicine residency in Minnesota. This was after I had, prepared all my DEP exams. So yeah, I kind of had to do them in a row because I didn't do them in school. So it was like
Wow.
yeah, it was just kind of one giant block of like studying. It wasn't easy. I remember having to cut my hair super short so I wouldn't feel motivated to go out. I would just, my plan was to just stay home, study,
Hmm.
and just take all of the exams and get all my applications together and go through residency. So Alhamdulillah, I got a good position and I really, really enjoyed residency actually. For me, that was the easy part, maybe because that's the first time as a doctor you have real, true responsibility.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that part. I did that for 3 years and then I was out in practice for 5 years. So that's a snippet of my career. I do inpatient medicine mostly.
Mm.
So
What was your perception of the difference between training in Pakistan versus doing your residency here?
yeah, there was huge differences, obviously. But I think pros and cons. With my training, there was a lot more didactic type learning as opposed to, direct hands on. So I felt like my basics in science were really strong, but the health systems of the two are so different. That was where I was having challenges. Like I came and all the drug names, the brand names are different. The way healthcare is administered, insurance companies, all of that was like new. So it's almost like the
Mhm.
system of it was the most difficult thing to get used to. But I mean, in terms of like doing a physical exam and relying on my physical exam, that's probably the
Right,
second difference is in developing countries, you rely less on technology and more on
right.
your hands. In the US, we talk about a differential diagnosis, which is basically what is the number of diagnoses that could, explain this finding. But in Pakistan, you had to come up with the diagnosis. You had to say, this is my leading diagnosis just based on your,
Right.
just based on your. So I felt like I was stronger than my peers in residency in terms of like doing the exam and doing the hands-on part. I thought that they were much more reliant on technology. So pros and cons overall. I thought it was a good experience going over there. Of course, it's a lot harder now. I think it's much more competitive now. In this
Right.
environment, I probably wouldn't recommend people to go through that path that I went through because I think it's a tougher path than just, going to school here. But at
Right.
that time, it was a little bit more even, I think. You could train somewhere else and do your residency in a
Hmm.
different country. But that's in a shell. I've had my family since then, alhamdulillah, my 2 kids. And right now I'm practicing part time. I was full time up until about a year ago. Just enjoying life, alhamdulillah. So that's my
Alhamdulillah.
story.
Okay.
So let's segue to yours. Tell me about your journey and how you went through your training. I guess the recap version of how you went through your training.
The recap version. My story is a little similar, except I trained in the US.
Mhm.
So I was in Texas. That's where my family's at. And that's where I did high school, college, medical school, and residency and fellowship. I've always been interested in medicine, and we have a very matriarchal family.
Mhm.
And the matriarch in our family was my grandmother, Ali Rahma. She had 10 kids
Mhm.
and like 4 boys and 6 girls.
Mhm.
And she treated them all the same. She
Yeah.
said, all of you guys go to school. When they got opportunities to go abroad to school, this was back in the 1970s, 80s,
Yeah.
she sent them girls by themselves,
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was absolutely amazing. I mean, this is a time when, the girls went to school to find a husband and,
Yeah.
got married off, but she was like,
Yeah.
respect society, and people would come and ask for
Oh.
her daughter's hands in marriage, and she would
Mhm.
say, "Oh, yes, that's wonderful. Let me go ask them." And in private, she would tell them, "You're going to school."
That was not typical back then. Yeah,
It
that's
wasn't. It wasn't. I think
mhm.
that's one of the things that shaped most of the women in my family is how strong she was, and she was very forward thinking,
Mhm.
way ahead of her time. And so naturally in our family, education was important,
Yeah.
right? If you weren't going to school, you better have, a darn good reason for not going to
Yeah.
school, right?
Yeah.
It was like school, school, school. That was it. And one of my aunts was actually a doctor in Somalia.
Mhm.
She was a family practitioner and trained in Thailand. So she came back home and had a clinic in her home and, took care of patients. That was my first exposure to medicine. And then when we were leaving Somalia, my grandmother was shot during the war. So that was my
Oh.
first experience of trauma,
Yeah.
someone injured, bleeding. And so when we came here, Alhamdulillah, she did fine and, got better in Somalia. We went to Kenya and then we finally came here. That was 92. She was one of the biggest supporters when I first voiced the fact that I wanted to be a surgeon,
Mm.
because everybody else was like, well, okay, we're in America, alhamdulillah,
Yes.
lakin. But in reality, look around, who are the people that are surgeons? Like when we go to the doctor, who do you
Right.
see? And it was, basically, and I started wearing the hijab around high school time.
Mhm.
And I was adamant about it. And they would ask me, and they said, if they ask you to, take off your hijab, will you do it? And I'm like, no,
Wow,
why?
really? Okay.
Those were the questions that I was asked to say,
Wow.
in order for you to accomplish what you want, you're going to have to compromise something about you.
Wow, yeah.
And the fact that I felt strongly about the hijab, it was made clear. And I remember meeting a Muslim woman at a scholarship dinner when I was a senior in high school and I was graduating. And I asked her, she was a physician, and I said, "Oh, very nice to meet you. I'm really interested in doing this, in doing surgery." And she's like, "Well, OB or family medicine, I can see, but surgeon," she's like, "my biggest advice to you is don't even think about it."
Very blunt. I mean,
Very
I
blunt.
it's a super male dominated field. Even now, right now, I don't know what the statistics are, but you
It's still
hardly
very male
see
dominated.
yeah, you hardly see women
It's 19%.
surgeons.
19% of US surgeons are women,
Okay.
right? So it's still a small subset. And
Yeah.
of that small subset, it's very, very small that are Muslim women and
Right.
very smaller percentage that are hijab wearing Muslim women, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, there are some. I went to the American College of Surgeons meeting not too long ago, I think last month, and I saw women that were wearing hijab and
That's
that
what I
were
was
there.
gonna ask. Is there more than you? Is there someone else out there?
Yes, yes, they are. And I was so happy. I saw a couple and I was like, hey, and they're looking at me like, who's that crazy person?
Right, right.
But yes, it's a handful. It's like 4 or 5 people. Going into this field for me was very disheartening. And the thing that kept pushing me forward was academically, I would perform well. But then from an academic point, I would be moved up to, say, like I was finishing college and I received invitation for interviews
Okay.
to medical school. I'm like, you know what? That means I passed, all the requirements. Now they just want to know I'm not a crazy person to be accepted to
Yeah.
medical school. What they talked about was my hijab more than anything else
Really? Wow.
in a medical school interview.
Yeah, it's
Right.
amazing. It's kind of skating a little bit on legal territory, yeah, right? Because
Oh, there were multiple things that were illegal that at the time you're a student looking to get accepted,
right.
looking to, at whatever cost you'll do
Yeah,
whatever you need
absolutely.
to do.
This is your
And that
dream. Yeah.
exactly. So there are a lot of things that when I look back in hindsight, it's like that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
That wasn't supposed to have been said. In hindsight, I can say that, but at the time, taking any action, that's the other thing is when you take an action like that, it's usually you're taking an action against a big corporation,
Right.
right?
Right.
Someone actually described this to me because I had brought it up to someone and they said, look at it this way. It's like a tiny little goldfish versus a shark. So you're going to get eaten alive. Your career is going to get ruined. And that's going to be the end of it. And so when I thought about it, I said, you know what? the impact that I can have is not through me trying to battle one or two things.
Yeah.
The impact that I can have is finish this, go through it, do whatever I have to do, whether it's my hijab. Nobody's going to come tell me to take it off, even though some have tried. Nobody would dare come and cross that line.
Hmm.
When I was having kids, throughout residency, all these illegal things were being said, the harassment, pregnancy discrimination, all these things were happening. But instead of ruining my career in the middle by picking these small fights, the long term goal that I had was, alhamdulillah, this,
Yeah.
right? Something like this to say, you know what? Yes, it's doable. You can go through it all. You can have the kids that you want to have. You can maintain your authenticity, your identity. You don't have to disavow whatever it is that makes you you. But we have to speak up.
Yes.
We have to voice the fact that these things are happening. They are not acceptable,
Absolutely.
and that, we will no longer stand for it. And the way I see things changing is you kind of have to force change. These things don't happen on their own.
Yeah, that's amazing. That would break people down to face that and to be judged so strongly and to be told you're not going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, it came to a point where it was almost on a daily basis. I think for me, I was kind of getting under people's skin because I kept having kids. It was like my intern year, my second year.
You had
And
all six of your children during training, right?
in residency, like
Mashallah.
all my kids have a residency year. I have my intern baby, my second year baby, my
Wow.
fourth year baby. I have my
Mashallah.
chief year twins, and I have my fellowship baby.
Mashallah. I feel like how you juggled that, you did that, and how you were able to actually finish your residency, that will have to be the subject of its own podcast. I feel like, don't you think so? I think
I,
that's going to be like something we need to dive into in deep details.
yeah, I think we can call that what not to do.
Yeah. One kid per
Yeah,
year.
one kid per what not to do during residency.
Right.
But one of the things that taught me, I've learned multiple lessons, and it has definitely made me grow as a person. It has made me become a better physician. It made
Mashallah.
me, manage my time better. It has taught me so many things, which is one of the reasons why I think pregnancy should be encouraged in residencies, especially surgery residency. But one of the biggest lessons it has taught me is the fact that it's not the end of the world. When I came into my program, the first intern to be pregnant, and they were
Hmm.
like, it's never been done. The last person who tried to do this, we're still waiting for her to come back from residency. It's never going to be done.
Honestly,
But
Khali, at this point, you're like minority times five, right? Because just pregnancy has its own, right? Is
exactly,
its own, discrimination, and just being a pregnant woman and it's of itself is so difficult. So it's like another thing on your, that
yeah.
makes you
And
stick
that's
out.
exactly. So it's like I was the big, sore thumb of the department.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess dealing with all the other discrimination kind of prepared me for this and
Mhm.
prepared me to better handle this. So the lesson that I learned was that by the time I finished and I
Mhm.
had left the program, almost every single fourth or fifth year resident woman was pregnant. And the
Okay.
program didn't shut down. They didn't have a hard time taking care of the patients. The program adapted and accommodated these pregnant women, and everything was fine. They all finished their training, patients were taken care of.
Yeah.
So, systems can change,
Yeah.
people can change. People who were telling me initially, oh, we're going to have to look for another resident to fill this position, by the end, we're saying, oh, we're a family friendly program,
What a
right?
switch. A hard
Right.
fought switch, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I think at the end, when I was finishing, and alhamdulillah, I was passing my boards and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, like that's when it clicked me to say, you know what? The low hanging fruit is to be not necessarily the low hanging fruit, but what people run towards is being litigious, is saying, oh, I was treated poorly in this place, and
Right.
I'm going to sue them.
Yeah.
And I think that's small thinking to say, okay, they did me wrong. It's
Yeah.
this one institution or this one person doing something to me personally, and it's looking
Mhm.
at individuals.
Mhm.
But what I see is it's a systematic issue. It's a
Yeah.
systems wide issue. Like not only did I face this in residency, but parts of medical school, parts of college, parts
Mhm.
of high school. It's a social thing, it's a societal thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where it's me being a visual representation of what a Muslim is and what a Muslim woman is. that's the reason I was treated that way. When I chose motherhood, even though
Mhm.
I was still pursuing my surgical career, when I
Mhm.
chose motherhood, I was a representation of women who are career oriented, but when it comes to family, they're not going to be able to finish it. I was given as an example, the last woman who
Mhm.
tried to have a kid, but he made her own decision to say, you know what? I choose my family instead of going back to a residency. That's a personal choice.
Yeah.
But that woman's personal choice, instead of saying that that was her choice, it's a woman's
It
change
was
of
used
mind.
against you. It
It was
was
used
yeah.
against all women, right?
Yeah,
So one woman
absolutely.
makes a decision that's not in line with what everybody wants. That is used as, a bar for all women to say, oh, the last woman who tried this,
Didn't
so
yeah.
all women are measured by that same bar,
Right.
right? So to
Absolutely.
me, that was another thing that kind of drove me and gave me a little bit more of a push to say, if I fail, then it's, oh, the last Muslim woman who tried to do this.
Yeah. That is
The last
really remarkable. Yeah.
we're used against each other to set examples. So that's why I think looking at the big picture to say, okay, you know what, don't fight the small battles. Look at this big picture. And if we can get to young, aspiring women to say, you're going to have unsolicited advice coming to you from everywhere,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? I have young women who are, in medical school coming to me and telling me, so and so told me that as a woman, I wouldn't be able to do this. I'm like, and who's so and so? Oh, it's a male. Oh, and he doesn't have any kids. But he told me his friend who was a woman in medicine
Oh
couldn't do,
boy. It happens all the
all
time.
the
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
All the time. And the reason I wanted for us to approach this as a professional, Muslim woman, not just this is what we see in medicine, what else is going on out there in all the other fields?
Oh, yeah. Your story is remarkable, but that level of adversity is definitely that challenge, that being stereotyped into a box and people giving you advice based on those stereotypes, which only serve to pull you down or push you
Right.
down, having to constantly prove yourself. It definitely is pervasive. And I think every woman who's Muslim who is in the process of professional development, and in the
Right.
process of choosing a career and a family is
Yep.
dealing with. We're all
Yep.
dealing with this to some extent. I think, what you faced in this extremely exclusive, male dominated world that is surgery, I think is extreme. I really do. And I commend you, Khali, for not only survived that process, but thrived and then you're coming out the other side happy as ever. You're such a happy person. You are, mashallah. To some degree, this is definitely something that all Muslim women around the world are facing.
And I think if we can get to that is the exact opposite of what society teaches us, what the
Yeah.
message tells us is our
Right.
position. I think that's where we can have the most impact.
I agree.
Right.
Absolutely. I agree with that sentiment. I think there does need to be another voice. There needs to be a voice that is, giving that the opposite of that message. And that voice should come from us, should come from other women, women who are Muslim from a diverse
Yeah.
background. Yeah.
That's why I ask people when they say, oh, so and so is telling me this. And I'm like, look at the source.
Yeah.
You should take that kind of advice with a grain of salt, unless that person has been through it. Like, I can't give advice to someone regarding something that is completely outside of the scope of my field of practice. If they want to know, how to get into law school, I'm like, you know what? Somebody else who can tell you about that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to delve into an area that is outside of my expertise. But we have people who have no idea what it feels, what it's like to get into medicine, what it's like to handle medicine and family, what it's like to pursue a certain specific field within medicine.
Yeah.
But they're out there giving all sorts of advice.
Absolutely. And you know what? This platform can also then serve, right, as a network because we really want to go out and find other Muslim women, talk to them about their experiences and their challenges, and talk to them about their careers, and they can then, kind of be that source for young women who are aspiring into those careers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Those are some ideas that we have, isn't it, for this
I'm
podcast?
I'm very excited for this podcast.
Yeah, me too. And I hope that our listeners are just as excited. We plan on talking a lot of things, inshallah, that's relevant to us as Muslim women, just kind of any topic, family, career. You talked about the hijab and what that means in life. We talked a little bit about work life balance. self-care, kids, anything that really matters to us. And of course, women. We're going to talk to women and talk about women who are inspirational, who lift us up, who have a good story, and whose story can be meaningful to a young Muslim woman out there, a young Muslim girl, inshallah.
Inshallah.
All right. That wraps up our podcast pilot, introduction to our podcast of professional Muslim women. And with that, we will see you guys in the next podcast.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for tuning into the Professional Muslim Women podcast, the place for Muslim women to inspire and be inspired.
Please join us on our Facebook group, Professional Muslim Women, to continue the conversation and connect with Muslim women like you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and drop us a like or a review.
We look forward to hearing from you soon.